The hand came out of nowhere. One second I was standing at the dessert table, reaching for a slice of wedding cake, and the next second my head snapped sideways and there was a sharp, ringing crack that echoed through the entire ballroom. I felt the heat before I felt the pain. That burning spread from my cheekbone all the way up to my temple, and for a moment the world tilted. The chandelier above me swayed. The music stopped. And every single person in that room, every one of the 300 guests in their silk gowns and tailored suits, turned and stared at me. Then came the wine. I heard Brooke's voice first, that clipped, polished voice that had been nothing but cold since the moment I walked through those doors. "Get out!" And then I heard the sound of a glass being lifted. I had just enough time to look up before the entire contents of a deep red Cabernet hit me full in the face. It went into my eyes, down my nose, soaked through the collar of the dress I had spent 3 weeks saving for. It dripped off my chin and spread a dark stain across the white tablecloth below me. And Brooke stood there with the empty glass in her hand, and a smile like she had just handled something unpleasant. Like I was a mess she had cleaned up. The room was silent. 300 people, not one sound, not one person moved to help me. My name is Claire Hayes, and I want to tell you everything that happened that day, not because I want sympathy, and not because I want revenge, but because I think you deserve to know what I know now. That sometimes the most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody sees coming, especially when that person is you. I need to back up, because you have to understand. I almost did not go to Melissa Thornton's wedding at all. Melissa and I were college roommates at the University of Connecticut, back when she was Melissa Kowalski from Bridgeport, and I was Claire Hayes from Nowhere Special. We were 20 years old and broke, and we shared a tiny dorm room with one window and a radiator that only worked on Tuesdays. We ate dining hall pasta 4 nights a week and stayed up until 2 in the morning talking about everything, her family, my family, what we wanted our lives to look like, what we were afraid of. She was funny and warm, and she had this laugh that came from somewhere deep in her chest, and she was my closest friend for 3 years. Then she graduated, moved to Westport, started dating a man named James Whitfield, and slowly, the way a tide pulls out without you noticing, she pulled away from me. The calls got shorter. The texts got fewer. And then one afternoon she called and said, very carefully, that she was moving in a different direction and she hoped I understood. I said I did. We both knew I was lying. That was 3 years before the wedding. And then, out of nowhere, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Cream-colored, heavy paper, her name in gold script in the corner. Inside, a wedding invitation. Melissa Kowalski inviting me to the ceremony and reception at the Whitfield estate in Greenwich. I held that invitation for a long time. I turned it over in my hands and thought about all the reasons not to go. I was a librarian. I made $41,000 a year. I drove a 2014 Honda Civic with a cracked side mirror I kept meaning to fix. I owned exactly one dress appropriate for a fancy occasion, and it was 3 years old. But I went. Because Melissa had been my friend, because she sent the invitation. And because I have never been the kind of person who lets fear of not fitting in keep her from showing up. That is both my greatest strength and, on that particular Saturday in September, my greatest mistake. I noticed Brooke Langford the moment I stepped out of my car. She was standing at the top of the estate steps with a clipboard and an earpiece and the posture of someone who had been waiting her whole life to be in exactly this position of authority. She was tall, perfectly dressed, with hair that looked engineered rather than styled. The kind of beautiful that costs money to maintain, worn like armor. Later I learned she was Melissa's best friend of 6 years, her maid of honor, and the person who had organized the entire wedding from the floral arrangements down to the font on the place cards. She loved Melissa the way certain people love things they own. Completely. Suffocatingly. With no room for anyone else. The first thing she said to me, before hello, before any kind of greeting, was, "Are you catering staff? The service entrance is around the back." I looked at her and said, "I'm a guest. Claire Hayes. I'm a friend of Melissa's from college." She looked at her clipboard. She looked at me. She looked at my dress. "I don't have a Claire Hayes on the primary list. You must be on the extended list." The way she said extended list made it very clear there were two categories of people at this wedding, the ones who mattered and the ones who were merely accommodated. I smiled. I said, "Then I'm on the extended list." She put me at a table near the kitchen corridor, next to the emergency exit, with a group of distant cousins who didn't know anyone. During the cocktail hour, I tried to say hello to Melissa. We spotted each other across the room, and for just a moment she gave me a real smile, the kind from the dorm room. But before I could cross the room, Brooke appeared at her elbow and steered her away, already talking in her ear, and Melissa let herself be steered. I stood there with a sparkling water in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Small. "I know what you're thinking. I should have left, but I don't have a lot of quit in me. My mother used to say that over the kitchen table, Claire, you don't have a lot of quit in you, like a warning and a compliment at the same time." So I sat down by the emergency exit. I smiled at the distant cousins, and I waited. Brooke made her move, right after the cake was cut. I saw her coming. You always can tell when someone has decided to finish something. She walked toward me with her clipboard tucked under one arm and her chin lifted, and she did not lower her voice. She wanted people to hear. "BROKE? I've been watching you all night. You've been trying to get close to Melissa, and it is not going to happen. Whatever you think you had with her is over. She has a real life now, and you showing up here in that dress, pretending you belong, is embarrassing for everyone, including you. So collect yourself and leave. Quietly, before you make this worse." I kept my voice calm. CLAIRE. I was invited. BROKE. People invite things out of politeness. They don't actually want to show up. Melissa is too kind to say it herself, so I'm saying it for her. You do not fit here. Everyone in this room can see that. So please do us all a favor and go. The nearby tables had gone quiet. I could feel it, that specific silence of people pretending not to listen while absorbing every single word. Something shifted in me. Not anger. Something quieter than anger. Something colder. CLAIRE. I'm going to finish my cake, and then I'll think about it. I turned back to my plate. That was the moment Brooke snapped. I heard the sharp intake of breath. I heard her hand cut through air. And then the crack, open-palmed, hard, and my head turned sideways and the heat spread instantly across my cheekbone. Before I could even register what had happened, I heard her pick up the wine glass from the table beside her. I looked up just in time. The Cabernet hit me like a wave everywhere all at once, running down my face, dripping from my jaw, soaking into the dress. BROK, now will you go? I sat completely still, wine dripping off the end of my nose, my cheek on fire, 300 people frozen around me like a photograph. And I thought about my mother, about having no quit in me, about every version of this moment I had lived through before, smaller versions, quieter ones, where someone decided I was beneath them and acted on it. I reached up. I wiped the wine from my eyes with the back of my hand. I took a slow breath. I looked at Brooke Langford directly. And I said very quietly, "No." It was James Whitfield who moved first. Not Melissa, who stood 20 feet away with both hands pressed to her mouth. Not a single guest, who had all become very interested in their tablecloths. James, the groom, a man I had never formally met, who had every reason to let this dissolve quietly and no obvious reason to make it worse. He stood up from the head table. He straightened his jacket, and he walked across that ballroom with the unhurried stride of a man who knew exactly what he was about to do. He stopped in front of Brooke and looked at her the way you look at something you have decided to remove from your life. "James," Brooke stepped back. BROK, James, I was just. James, step back. She took one step back, chin still up, but her hands were shaking around the stem of that empty glass. James turned to me and his expression changed completely, becoming careful, full of weight, almost like an apology before he had said a word. James, Claire, I am so sorry. I should have spoken earlier tonight. I didn't handle this right and I'm sorry. There was something in the way he said my name, not like an introduction, like he already knew me, like he had been waiting for the right moment and the moment had arrived badly and too late. Claire, you know who I am. James, yes, I've known for some time, and I need to tell this room something. He turned to face the 300 people who were hanging on every syllable. James, my family's foundation runs a children's literacy program. We build libraries in underserved communities across New England. We fund reading programs, book drives, after-school tutoring. In the past 4 years, we've built 12 libraries, donated 400,000 books, and served 63,000 children. It is the work I am most proud of in my life. And for 4 years, that entire program has been funded by a single anonymous donor, someone who gave quietly, consistently, and never once asked for recognition or a seat at any table. We tried to identify them for 2 years before tracing it through the trust. The donor is Claire Hayes, daughter of Margaret and Harold Hayes, founders of the Hayes Education Trust. Claire has been running that trust since she was 26 years old. She has given more to children who cannot read than anyone else in this room. She drives a 10-year-old car. She works at a public library. She sat by the emergency exit tonight without a single complaint. And she just had wine thrown in her face by someone who decided, based on the price of her dress, that she was not worth basic human decency. The room did not breathe. James looked at Brooke, the way you look at something final. James, you put your hands on a guest in my home. You humiliated her in front of 300 people because you thought she was beneath you. He said nothing else to her. He simply turned to a staff member nearby and said, very quietly, "Please have Ms. Langford's car brought around." That was all it took. Brooke opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Melissa, who was looking at the floor, looked at the room, which gave her nothing. She picked up her clutch, and she walked out. She passed within 3 feet of me on her way to the door, and I watched her go without a word, because some silences say more than anything you could ever speak. Melissa came to me when the room finally began to breathe again, when conversations slowly restarted, and the music came back on, and the staff quietly replaced the wine-stained tablecloth as though nothing had happened. She came with a linen napkin in her hand, which was a small and inadequate gesture, but I took it. I wiped my face. She stood there in her wedding dress looking like someone had handed her a version of herself she wasn't ready to meet. Melissa, I didn't know. About any of it, the trust, the libraries, I swear I had no idea. Claire, I know you didn't. Melissa, I'm so sorry, for tonight, for Brooke, for 3 years ago, for the phone call. She was crying, real crying, not the pretty kind. The kind that doesn't care what it looks like. And I looked at her and thought about everything I could say. There was a lot. About being erased from her history. About standing at the back of her wedding feeling invisible while her best friend treated me like an inconvenience. I could have said all of it. But I looked at Melissa in her beautiful white dress, and I could see that she already knew. You can always tell when the knowing lands. It had landed. Claire, you sent me an invitation. After 3 years, why? Melissa, because I missed you. And missing you meant admitting I had done something wrong, and I couldn't admit that and keep living the way I was living. So I buried it. But then the wedding came, and I thought if she shows up, maybe it means I haven't completely lost who I used to be. I held the wine-stained napkin. I thought about the dorm room, the dining hall pasta, 2 in the morning and that laugh from somewhere deep in her chest. Claire, you haven't lost it, Mel. You just buried it for a while. That's different. We didn't hug. It didn't feel like the moment for it. But something passed between us, the first honest thing in years. Maybe that's where a friendship comes back from. Not from a grand gesture, but from one true sentence in a room full of people who still weren't sure what to do with their champagne. I left an hour later. James stopped me at the door and pressed my hand in both of his and said, "Thank you for the libraries, for the kids, for staying tonight when you had every reason not to." I told him it was never about being thanked. He said he knew. I believed him. The valet brought my Civic around. I tipped the kid and sat in the parking area for a moment before pulling out, watching the estate in my rearview mirror. All that light, all those flowers, 300 people inside stitching their evening back together. My cheek was still tender. The wine stain on my dress wasn't coming out, I already knew. 3 weeks of saving, and the dress was done. I wasn't angry driving home. I'm still not angry. I'm something more useful than angry. I grew up being underestimated. My parents weren't wealthy when I was young. The trust came from decades of quiet, careful work, and by the time it had real size to it, they were both gone and it was mine to carry. I was 26 years old with a mission that felt too large for me and I almost walked away from it. But I didn't. I figured out what I believed in. I figured out what I wanted to leave in the world, and I built something quietly without needing anyone to witness it. People like Brooke are fluent in the language of surfaces. Your car, your dress, your job title, your table assignment. They are so convinced that language is the only one that matters, so certain that surfaces reveal everything worth knowing, that they genuinely cannot imagine a world where the woman sitting by the emergency exit is quietly changing children's lives. That is their limitation, not mine. I drove home. I washed wine out of my hair. I made tea and sat at my kitchen table looking at the invitations still stuck to my refrigerator with a little book-shaped magnet, and I thought about 12 libraries in 12 communities. Children walking through a door and finding a book that belonged to them. A story they could hold in their hands. A world they could step into and not be told they were on the extended list. I thought about Brooke walking out with her clipboard and her clutch, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not victory, nothing at all, because she was never the point. The children were the point. The books were the point. The libraries were the point. They always were. My name is Claire Hayes. I am 32 years old. I drive a 10-year-old car with a cracked side mirror. I work at a public library and I love it more than I can explain at most dinner parties, which is fine, because I don't go to many dinner parties. I own 0 nice dresses now. And if someone has ever made you feel small, at a table, in a room, at a wedding near the emergency exit with bad shrimp, and a dress you cannot afford to replace, I need you to hear this one thing. The room does not decide your worth. The tablecloth you sit near does not decide your worth. The list you appear on, the car you drive, the dress you can afford, the person who decides you don't belong, none of it has ever had the authority to determine what you are worth or what you are capable of. That authority has only ever lived in one place. In you. Stay anyway. Finish your cake. Wipe the wine off your face and stay in your seat and let the room figure out what it got wrong about you. Because it did. It almost always does. I know because I stayed, and the room found out.